Hi everyone, welcome to Tales of Dread. This episode is one of the most exciting and surprising stories I've ever heard. A person who works for the government tells us about a cover-up they got caught up in by accident. This is something you don't want to miss. Then, a scary thing comes up to a truck driver who is taking a break outside of his cab. So, if you like these stories as much as a dog likes to sleep, please join our pack and click all those buttons. Great. Thanks. Let's start the stories now. Small black square, small black square, small black square, you will soon find out why I can't give you my name yet. But in short, when I worked in Washington, I saw how the government tried to hide something. I can't give you many details because if I do, well, lives will be in danger, especially mine. But I'll tell you about one of the scariest nights I ever had that had something to do with all of it at the time. I worked in the basement of a building just outside the Beltway, and I could go almost anywhere in the building. Now, there were a few floors with rooms I couldn't get into, but for the most part, I could go wherever I wanted in the building. One thing about the basement where I worked that I didn't understand at first was that it had its own power and water supply. We'll talk more about that later. So, on the 8th floor of this building, there was a restricted area that only people with special clearance could get into. I was one of those people, and I had to go up there and work sometimes in order to finish my tasks. Everyone with access to the floor knew each other, which was important for keeping the floor safe. So, one night I was working on the 8th floor, and as I walked through the restricted area, I saw a person in a blue jumpsuit moving around in a room near the end of the hall. I thought that was strange because all the rooms in that area are usually locked, and no one should be in that room. And I didn't know the person either. So I went to the door and looked in through the window to see what they were doing. The room was about 30 feet by 30 feet and had a big window with a view of the city. I could see lights from cities far away. The room had white walls, and in the middle, I saw something I had never seen there before. There was a long table with 2 computer monitors, a big clock on the wall, and a TV screen on the right wall. At the time, it was turned off. After a few minutes of standing there and looking in, the figure started walking towards me from the other side of the room. He looked surprised to see me standing there on the other side of the door, but he kept coming, and before I knew it, he opened the door, came out into the hall with me, and stopped. I was worried because he didn't really look at me, and his behavior was strange. I asked him what he was there for and who he was. I asked if it was okay for him to be there. He told me his name was John, but he couldn't say anything else because it was secret. I told him I was good to go. I knew every person who could get in. He said that clearances didn't matter if someone wanted to know about his work. He told me I had to leave and forget what I had seen, and that he would talk to his bosses about it. He said it was for my own safety. As I looked him over, I saw that the lanyard around his neck did have all the right credentials, but I wasn't a top-level employee. So I just went back to my office, but I was determined to find out more about him. As I walked away, I saw him put codes into another locked door and enter there. I thought about him while I worked in the basement for the next few hours. I was trying to figure out what was so important that they would go to such lengths to keep it secret, especially since I had my clearances. I was also trying to figure out if I should say something right away to anyone. But I decided to go back to the 8th floor that night to try to figure out what was going on there before I left. I didn't know what I'd do if John was there and saw me, but I had to find out more. So, when I got to the 8th floor, I went to the same room's door and looked inside. John was there, but he wasn't alone this time. He was in the room with 2 other men who were both wearing dark suits. They were all facing away from me. I was about to turn around and leave when John quickly turned around and saw me. This time, though, he motioned for me to come in, which was not at all what I was expecting. When I opened the door and walked in, the first thing he told me was that I was free. I asked him what he meant and what was going on, but he just told me to be quiet and watch. I was very confused at this point, but they led me to a wall and opened a door to an elevator I had never seen before. They all got on, and I got on after them. John pushed a few buttons, and before I knew it, we were going down. When we got out, I think we were in the basement. I had never seen it before, though. I wondered why I didn't know about this, which, to be honest, began to scare me. I thought it could be a command center, but it turned out to be something much more interesting. Then, the men led me to a cage-like area in the corner that looked more like a jail cell and pointed to the back of it. In the corner of the cage was a small creature that looked like a person. It was naked, and its skin was so pale I thought I could see its bones. Its eyes were also pale and seemed hollow, and its head was bigger than it should have been for its body. It just sat there without moving. I don't even know if it really knew I was there. It looked like it might have been high or something, but I know it was aware because it turned its head toward me. When I walked up to the bars, John said, "You can't tell anyone about this, it's too dangerous." I just looked at him in silence and wondered what was going on. I asked him what it was and why they didn't want to talk about it. He told me that the public shouldn't know about it and that I would be in more danger if I did. I asked him why he was showing me, and he said it was a dangerous secret that he couldn't tell me all the details about because it was too big. So, I was taken back to the 8th floor and told to leave the building. I was left confused, almost in shock. I had never been in this kind of situation before, so I didn't know what to do. I chose not to say anything about it. So, while I was working, I would go to that floor every so often to see if anything else was going on. But I had never seen anything like what I saw. I also started to feel like someone was watching me and following me at work. But no matter how many times I looked, I never saw anyone watching me or following me. I never heard anything else about what they took me to see after that. Nobody ever brought it up again. I never saw John again. I'm starting to think that what they showed me was wrong and that's why they were watching me. I shouldn't have seen what I did. So, because of all that stress, I quit that job and moved on to something else. But now I wish I hadn't done that because I don't feel safe. I feel like I'm in the open, and that's why I'm writing to you now. I want this information to be known by everyone. In the end, I'm sure I saw a real alien being that looked like a person and was being kept at that place. I want to tell everyone about this in case there are other people who have seen things like this before. I've seen it too. I was there and saw it. I don't have much more to say than that. That's all there was to it. But please share this if you're willing to. On the night. During the slow parts of my night, I had a short encounter with work that was unusually slow. I park in front of the building where I work and watch the animals. It's full of foxes, coyotes, raccoons, and every now and then I'll see a red wolf trotting across an open field in search of small game, where the woods used to be. Our building is on a dead-end street that backs up to a big creek. To the left, there is a smaller creek that flows into the big one. A big river about a mile away feeds both creeks. I should also say that there is a large wooded area on the way to our building, and that the area is dark until you get to the parking lot. About a week before my encounter, I would sit at the end of the road to do my paperwork and wait for the next call as I parked there. I would feel like someone was watching me. When I looked up, I almost expected to see someone standing in front of my truck. Let me say that darkness or the woods don't scare me or even make me jumpy in the least. I grew up in a swamp near a river, and I rather like being alone. But not only did I feel like I was being watched and that someone was in the room with me, I also noticed that there were no normal night sounds like crickets, frogs, and so on. I also didn't understand why there didn't seem to be any wildlife in the area. On the night I had my encounter, this really bothered me and I couldn't figure out why. I put some wet dog food at the edge of the woods to try to get the raccoon family to come out so I could at least make sure they were all right. I had watched this family of raccoons grow up from babies, so not seeing them bothered me. I also didn't see the grey fox that lived in the area. This fox would get within 4 to 5 feet of you, but it would always be on guard. He would hang out with certain people and then go back into the woods. So, I took the lid off of some smelly dog food. I heard a deep growl come from the edge of the wood line as I took the top off the can. I had never heard an animal growl so loudly and deeply. At first, I thought it might have been a jake brake from the highway, which can be heard from our building, but that wasn't it. I could hear it and feel it from the way the wood line hit my face. It felt like a vibration in my chest, like a growl. I knew this wasn't a bear as sure as someone knows where their left hand is. Right? You just know, and yes, we do have bears here, but I can tell you straight out that what you saw was not a bear or any other local animal. I put my head down and didn't want to look up. I threw a can of food on the ground with a hard thump and hoped that whatever was in the wood line would rather have that can of food than me. I turned my back on the food and walked away with my head down until I got to my truck. My instinct told me to drive away, so I did. About a half hour later, I came back and, despite my instincts, was ready to figure out what had happened. I parked in the same spot, but this time I walked to the back of my truck to smoke. While I was standing there, I saw a dark mass cross the road and go into an open field with mostly wild blackberry bushes and grass. I have trained my eyes. Even though I had taken a lot of notes, I had to admit that a TBI was making it hard for me to remember things in the short term. That was the end of my time as a cop. What I saw at the time, though, will always be in my mind. I can only say that this creature looked like a hybrid, which is what I thought it was at the time, even though it walked on all fours. I didn't think it looked natural at all. It moved in very quick, smooth steps. When I think about it now, I was most surprised that the creature was smart enough to try to look natural. But there was something wrong with its gait. It looked like its front legs were pulling its body forward. Its shoulders were hunched, and its back was long. The creature was black, and I can only describe it as a dark mass that didn't reflect much light. The strangest thing was that I could see most of the small animals clearly, but the creature, I now think is a dogman, was very dark. It had a long nose that fit its body. I was most surprised by its ears. They were folded back like the ears of a Dutch shepherd or a German shepherd. I guess because I used to work with dogs. I could make out the shape of the ears. I don't know what its eyes looked like or what kind of tail it had. I just know it was there 1 minute and gone the next. When it got light out, I looked for tracks, but I went with my gut and didn't go into the field to look for it. On the way down to the smaller creek, the ground was mostly grass, and the dirt that was there was hard. I was confused, but I was more surprised than anything else. I didn't tell anyone about what happened to me for a few months. I then looked on the internet for what I had seen. I guess I was wondering if it was some kind of man-made hybrid creature that had gotten away. I found a few websites online, but none of them seemed to match what I had seen. Nothing until I saw a picture of what I thought was a dogman. If you take what I saw and put it on its feet instead of standing up, that's what I saw. Without question. Small black square, I think this dogman was a young adult, but he or she wasn't too big. The thing I think about the most is how the dogman had to find my scent before he could clear the wood line. I know that scent. I know what to do. Before he came out of the woods, the dogman saw me. I'm guessing that's the answer. I'll never have. After keeping my experience to myself for a few months, I told a few of my co-workers about it. Of course, they told me it was a bear or a big wolf, but they did agree that there hadn't been any wildlife for a while. I was asked to tell my story, but I think it was just so that my co-workers could make fun of me behind my back. I stand by what I saw, but because of people like them, I don't talk about it much. As I write this, I'm back on the night shift and parked in the same place where I had my encounter. I think that dogman has already left the area. I guess the animals are back and the night sounds are everywhere. I'll always be curious about whether it will happen again. But I can't say I'll ever again walk alone through the woods at night to look for animal tracks.